At the Christmas dinner, my son-in-law said I would be the maid for the night. They left me eating standing by the sink while everyone laughed. The next day, I canceled the loan I had made for his business. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought my own daughter would let someone treat me this way. The aroma of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled the air as I pulled into Amy's driveway. The Christmas lights twinkled against the evening sky, illuminating the two-story suburban home my daughter and her husband Peter had purchased last spring. My arms were laden with carefully wrapped presents and a homemade apple pie, Amy's favorite since childhood. I'd spent the previous night perfecting that pie, just as I'd done every Christmas since she was 5. Some traditions shouldn't change, even when everything else does. As I rang the doorbell, I straightened my forest green dress, the one I'd splurged on at Nordstrom after finalizing the loan paperwork for Peter's struggling construction business. $300,000 from my retirement fund. It's just until we secure the government contract, he had assured me. You're saving 20 jobs, Amber. The door swung open, revealing Peter in an expensive-looking suit, champagne flute in hand. His eyes, slightly glazed, swept over me and my offerings without warmth. Finally, he said, checking his Rolex. The help has arrived. I forced a smile, assuming it was just another of his poor attempts at humor. Merry Christmas, Peter. As I stepped inside, the conversation from the dining room momentarily halted. Amy's laugh, that familiar sound that used to warm my heart, rang out above the others. Mom, she appeared, looking stunning in a red cocktail dress I'd never seen before. She air-kissed my cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. You're late. I glanced at my watch. It's 6:55. You said 7. Everyone else managed to be here by 6:30, Peter interrupted. Then, turning to face their guests, 4 couples I didn't recognize, he raised his voice. Everyone, this is Amy's mother, Amber. She's graciously offered to help with serving tonight. My smile froze as he reached behind the door and pulled out a white apron. Not the cute holiday one with reindeer that hung in their kitchen, but a plain utilitarian one that looked like it belonged in a restaurant's back room. Peter, I don't understand. Oh, Mom, don't be such a spoil sport, Amy said, the slight slur in her voice revealing she'd had more than 1 glass of champagne. It's just a little Christmas fun. We told everyone we hired help, but then I said, why hire someone when my mom loves taking care of everyone? The guests laughed, some looking uncomfortable, others amused at my expense. Peter handed me the apron. The kitchen's that way. Turkey needs to be carved. Potatoes need mashing. Chop, chop. I looked at Amy, waiting for her to say something, anything, to defend me. She just gave me an impatient smile and a slight eye roll toward her guests as if to say, see what I have to deal with? I brought presents, I said weakly, still clutching the bags and pie. Just put them with the others, Amy said, already, turning back to her guests. And hurry with that turkey. Everyone's starving. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of humiliation. I carved the turkey that Peter had merely warmed up after ordering it pre-cooked from an expensive caterer. I mashed potatoes that came from a gourmet grocery store container. I served wine to guests who barely acknowledged my existence. Don't forget, everyone likes their gravy on the side, Amy instructed loudly as I prepared the plates, as if I hadn't been cooking Christmas dinner since before she was born. When I finally finished serving everyone, Peter glanced up. Oh, Amber, you can fix yourself a plate too. Just eat in the kitchen so you can keep an eye on things. I stood beside the sink, eating turkey that had gone cold, listening to the laughter from the dining room. Through the doorway, I could see them all raising their glasses in a toast. To family, Peter said, his arm around Amy's shoulder. Those who matter, anyway. More laughter, more champagne. I set my half-eaten plate down, no longer hungry. Need some water with that? I turned to find an older gentleman, one of the guests, extending a glass toward me. His kind eyes showed something the others lacked: basic human decency. "Thank you," I said, taking the water. "I'm Amber." "I know," he replied. "I'm Richard, Peter's new investor, and I have to say, I'm not impressed with how they're treating you." Before I could respond, Peter appeared in the doorway. "Richard, we're about to play charades. Amber's fine here. That's what mothers do, right? Take care of everything?" As Richard reluctantly rejoined the party, I wiped away a single tear that had escaped despite my best efforts. 57 years old, a successful career behind me, a lifetime of sacrifices for my daughter, and this was what I'd been reduced to: the help. The worst part wasn't the apron, or eating alone by the sink. It was seeing Amy, my sweet Amy, transformed into someone who could laugh while her mother was degraded. As I loaded the dishwasher with expensive china, my hands trembling with exhaustion and something else, rage, maybe, or determination, I made a decision. Tomorrow I would make a call to my bank, and Peter's loan wouldn't just be canceled, it would be the beginning of something neither of them saw coming. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Amy laughing as Peter handed me that awful apron. The memory stung, worse than any physical pain I'd ever experienced. Morning came with a pale winter sun streaming through my bedroom curtains. I made coffee on autopilot, my mind replaying the events of Christmas dinner like a horror movie I couldn't shut off. The phone rang twice, Amy's number, but I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear whatever excuse she might offer. Instead, I called my bank. Then my lawyer, Harold, who had helped me manage my finances since Thomas died 8 years ago. "Amber? Merry Christmas. Everything all right?" Harold's familiar voice carried concern. "I need to cancel a loan," I said without preamble. "The one to Peter's company." "The construction loan?" "But you just finalized that 2 weeks ago. 300,000 is—" "I know exactly how much it is," I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. "Can it be done?" Harold was silent for a moment. "There's a 48-hour rescission clause in most of my contracts. Let me check. Yes, you're still within the window. But Amber, what happened?" I couldn't bring myself to explain the humiliation. "Let's just say I've seen Peter's true character. The loan was a mistake." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my coffee. The house felt too quiet, too empty. On impulse, I opened my laptop and checked my online banking. What I saw made my stomach drop. There had been 3 withdrawals from my investment account in the past week, all to Peter's company. $300,000 for the loan, but also $50,000 and $25,000 in separate transactions. I had authorized the loan, but not these additional withdrawals. My hands trembled as I dialed Harold back. "There's more," I said when he answered, explaining what I'd found. "That's fraud, Amber," he said gravely. "He must have gotten access to your account somehow. Did you ever give him your passwords? Sign any other papers?" "No, but—" I paused, remembering. "He helped me set up a new online banking account last month. Said my old one wasn't secure enough." "That's how he did it," Harold confirmed. "I'm calling the bank's fraud department right now. We'll freeze everything." I thanked him and hung up, a strange calm settling over me. Then my doorbell rang. Rose, my neighbor of 15 years, stood on my porch with a plate of Christmas cookies and concern etched on her kind face. "You didn't answer my texts," she said, following me inside. "How was dinner at Amy's?" I hadn't planned to tell anyone, but as soon as Rose sat down at my kitchen table, the whole story spilled out. The apron being forced to serve, eating alone by the sink while everyone laughed. "That little." Rose didn't finish the sentence, but her expression darkened. "And Amy just let it happen?" "She encouraged it," I said, the admission making my voice crack. She's changed so much since marrying him. Sometimes I barely recognize her. Rose reached across the table and squeezed my hand. This isn't the first time, is it? The question unlocked something in me, a realization that had been building for months. No, I admitted. It started with small things after they got engaged. Peter would make little jokes at my expense and Amy would laugh. Then he began questioning my financial decisions, offering to help manage my money since Thomas died. I remembered how Peter had gradually inserted himself into my financial affairs, first with concerns about my investment choices, then suggestions about my retirement accounts, always claiming he was looking out for family. Did you know, I continued, that they remodeled their kitchen last month? New Viking range, custom cabinets, marble countertops. Peter told me business was so bad he might have to lay off workers. If I didn't help? Rose's eyes widened. So the loan was never for his business, I finished. At least, not entirely. I checked their social media this morning. Amy posted pictures of their new boat 2 days ago. Early Christmas present from my amazing husband, she wrote. A boat, Rose echoed in disbelief. A 30-foot cabin cruiser. My voice was hollow. Apparently, they're planning a New Year's cruise down the coast, Rose shook her head. With your money? Yes. Money I saved for 25 years. Money that was supposed to last through my retirement. I took a deep breath. Money that was meant to be Amy's inheritance someday. What are you going to do now? Rose asked. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Harold. Access revoked. Unauthorized transfers flagged for investigation. Call me. I showed the message to Rose, and for the first time since last night, I felt a flicker of strength return. I'm taking back control, I said. Starting with my money, but not ending there. Rose nodded approvingly. It's about time. As if on cue, my phone rang. Amy's name flashed on the screen. This time, I answered. Mom? Her voice sounded panicked. What's happening? Peter just got calls from the bank. I canceled the loan, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, and reported the unauthorized withdrawals. What? You can't do that! Peter's business depends on that money. Does his business also depend on a new boat? I asked quietly. The line went silent for a moment. Then, that's different. It was a business. Investment for client entertainment. And the kitchen remodel? Was that for client entertainment too? I don't understand why you're being like this, Amy said, her voice hardening. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Amy? The question wasn't angry, just genuinely curious. Made me serve your dinner guests? Mocked me in my own family? Used me as your personal bank? That's not fair. It was just a joke last night. If you can't take a little teasing, it wasn't teasing. It was cruelty, I interrupted. And it showed me exactly what you and Peter think of me. Amy's voice turned tearful, a tactic I'd seen her use since childhood when confronted with her own behavior. Mom, please. Peter says if the loan falls through, people will lose their jobs. Is that what you want? To hurt innocent people because you're being oversensitive? For a moment, I almost wavered. Then I remembered eating cold turkey by the sink alone, while my daughter laughed with her friends. I'll tell you what, Amy, I said, my resolve strengthening. Have Peter show me the payroll records for these employees he's so concerned about. Have him show me the business accounts. If the money is truly for the business, we can discuss it. That's private company information. He doesn't have to prove anything to you. Then I don't have to give him anything, I replied simply. The loan is canceled. Goodbye, Amy. I hung up before she could respond, my heart racing but my mind clearer than it had been in months. Well done, Rose said softly. My phone immediately began ringing again. This time it was Peter. I switched it off and set it aside. They'll come here next. I told Rose. When they realize I'm serious. Rose smiled grimly. Then we better get ready for them, shouldn't we? They arrived precisely as Rose predicted. Not even an hour had passed before I heard the screech of tires in my driveway. Rose and I exchanged glances over our coffee cups. "Want me to stay?" she asked. I shook my head. "I need to handle this myself." Rose squeezed my hand, gathered her purse, and slipped out the back door just as the doorbell started ringing incessantly. Whoever was pressing it, Amy or Peter, wasn't letting up. I took my time walking to the door, smoothing down my sweater and taking a deep breath. When I opened it, they both stood there, Peter red-faced with anger, Amy looking both frantic and embarrassed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Peter burst out before I could speak. He tried to push past me into the house. I stood my ground, blocking the entrance. "I don't recall inviting you in." Amy's eyes widened. I'd never used that tone with her before. "Mom, please," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The neighbors will hear." "Like you cared about my dignity last night?" I replied coolly. "But fine, come in. Let's talk like adults." Peter stormed into my living room, pacing like a caged animal. "You had no right to cancel that loan. We have contracts with suppliers, payroll to meet." I sat down in Thomas's old armchair, the one piece of furniture I couldn't bear to replace after he died. It always made me feel stronger somehow. "Funny you should mention contracts," I said calmly. "Because I've been reviewing mine with your company. The funds were specifically allocated for outstanding supplier invoices and employee payroll, not personal purchases." "What personal purchases?" Amy interjected, looking genuinely confused. I turned to her. "The boat, Amy, the kitchen remodel, the weekend trips to wine country that you've been posting about." Peter waved his hand dismissively. "Business expenses, client entertainment." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Then you won't mind showing me the business records that classify them as such. I'm sure the IRS would be interested in that classification too." Peter's face flushed a deeper shade of red. "You think you're so smart. You're just a bitter old woman who can't stand to see her daughter happy." Amy gasped. "Peter!" I didn't flinch. "Is that really what you think, Amy? That I'm bitter? That I don't want your happiness?" Amy shifted uncomfortably. "No, but, Mom, you don't understand how stressful things have been. The business is struggling. We needed that loan." "Then why the boat? Why the remodel?" I asked softly. "Because appearances matter in my business," Peter shouted. "No one wants to hire a contractor who looks broke." I nodded slowly. "I understand appearances, like how it looked to have your mother-in-law serving your guests while eating by the sink." Amy had the decency to look ashamed. "That was just a stupid joke. We'd had a few drinks." "It wasn't a joke to me," I cut in. "And it made something very clear. You don't respect me, either of you. You see me as nothing more than a checkbook." Peter snorted. "Don't be so dramatic." "I'm being practical," I countered. "I've decided that if you only value me for my money, then I'll simply remove that value from our relationship." Amy's eyes widened in alarm. "What does that mean?" "It means the loan is canceled. The unauthorized withdrawals are being investigated by the bank's fraud department. And going forward, there will be no more financial support from me." "You can't do this." Peter's voice rose dangerously. "Do you know what I could do to you?" I felt a chill at his words, but kept my face neutral. "Are you threatening me in my own home, Peter?" Amy stepped between us. "No one's threatening anyone. Mom, please, we can work this out. I know last night got out of hand, but cutting us off financially is an overreaction." "Is it?" I looked directly into her eyes. "Tell me honestly, Amy. If I had no money, if I was struggling to pay my own bills, would you and Peter still make time for me? Would I be welcome at your table as family, not as the help?" Amy opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. Peter grabbed Amy's arm. "This is ridiculous. We're leaving. When you come to your senses, give us a call." I stood up. "Before you go, I have something for you." I walked to my desk and returned with an envelope, which I handed to Amy. "What's this?" she asked. "The receipt for your wedding, the down payment on your first house, the loans for Peter's business startup, every dollar I've given you over the past 5 years." My voice remained steady. "I never kept track before, because that's not what mothers do. But since our relationship has become purely transactional, I thought you should have an accurate accounting." Amy flipped through the pages, her face paling. "Mom, I never what? Never realized how much I've given? Or never thought I'd stop?" Peter snatched the envelope from Amy's hands and tossed it onto my coffee table. "Keep your receipts and your guilt trips. We don't need your money." I smiled faintly. "I'm glad to hear that, because you no longer have access to it." When they left, Peter slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, I sank back into Thomas's chair, emotionally exhausted but somehow lighter. For the first time in years, I had stood my ground. My phone pinged with a text from Rose. "All clear?" "Yes," I typed back. "They're gone." "For now," Rose replied. "But this isn't over." I knew she was right. This wasn't just about money. It was about power and control. By standing up to them, I had disrupted the dynamic they'd come to depend on. They wouldn't accept that easily. As I made myself a fresh cup of tea, I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a strange excitement. For too long, I'd allowed my desire to stay connected to Amy override my own self-respect. I'd become a silent partner in my own diminishment. No more. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my terms. I glanced at the family photo on my mantle, Amy's college graduation, the 3 of us smiling. Thomas, me, and our beautiful daughter. That family was gone now, transformed by time and choices into something I barely recognized. But perhaps from these ashes, something new could emerge. Something built on genuine respect rather than financial dependence. I could only hope that Amy would eventually see the truth, and if she didn't, well, I would learn to live with that too. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, it was truly mine to choose. The next week passed in a strange haze of both peace and anxiety. With each day that my phone didn't ring with Amy's number, I felt both relief and a deepening sadness. The house seemed quieter than usual, my routines hollow without the regular interruptions of her calls asking for advice or money. Harold called on Friday with an update. "The bank has frozen the unauthorized withdrawals," he explained. "They're building a case, but they need to know if you want to press charges." The question hit me like a physical blow. "Charges? You mean criminal charges?" "Fraud is a crime, Amber," Harold said gently. "What Peter did, accessing your accounts without authorization, that's illegal." I closed my eyes, picturing Amy's face if her husband was arrested. No matter how angry I was, I couldn't do that to her. "No charges," I decided. "But I want the money returned." Harold sighed. "Without pressing charges, recovery might be complicated. They could claim you authorized it verbally." "Then we'll handle it another way," I said, an idea forming. "Can you draft a formal letter outlining the unauthorized withdrawals and demanding repayment? Include that we're willing to negotiate a payment plan instead of pursuing legal action." "I can do that," Harold replied. "But Amber, these types of people, they rarely respond to reasonable demands." "Maybe not," I admitted. "But this gives them a chance to do the right thing. One last chance." After hanging up, I wandered through my house, feeling restless. Every corner held memories of Amy. Her school photos on the walls, the chip in the coffee table from when she'd dropped her science project, the the height marks penciled on the kitchen door frame. I'd built my life around being her mother. Even after she grew up, married, and moved out, I'd continued organizing my world around her needs and wants. Who was I without that role? The question haunted me as I pulled out photo albums I hadn't looked at in years. There I was before Amy was born, younger, with a confident smile, standing in front of the small accounting firm where I'd worked my way up from receptionist to partner. There was Thomas and me on our honeymoon, hiking through national parks with backpacks and adventurous spirits. When had I lost that woman? When had I become just Amy's mom and nothing else? The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought it might be Amy, coming to apologize or at least talk. Instead, I found Rose on my porch, holding a bottle of wine and a sympathy card. "I know it's not a death," she said as I ushered her in. "But it is a loss, and losses should be acknowledged." The simple recognition of my pain brought tears to my eyes. We settled in the living room, where Rose poured wine into mismatched mugs. I couldn't bring myself to use the crystal glasses Amy had given me last Christmas. "Have you heard from her?" Rose asked. I shook my head. "Not a word. Harold's sending a letter about the unauthorized withdrawals, but I'm not pressing charges." Rose's eyebrows shot up. "Why not? What Peter did was theft." "Because criminal charges would destroy any chance of reconciliation with Amy," I explained. "I'm angry, not vengeful." Rose swirled her wine thoughtfully. "And if they ignore the letter? If they keep the money? Then I'll have to accept that loss too." I sighed. "But I'm hoping it won't come to that." "And what about you?" Rose asked. "What are you going to do now?" The question seemed huge, overwhelming. What was I going to do? I was 57, financially secure if I was careful, but suddenly, without the purpose that had driven me for decades. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've spent so long being defined by my relationship with Amy that I'm not sure who I am without it." Rose refilled our mugs. "Then maybe it's time to find out." Later that night, after Rose left, I found myself sitting at my rarely used desk, pulling out a notepad. At the top, I wrote, "Who is Amber without Amy?" The blank page stared back at me accusingly. I tried to remember my dreams before motherhood consumed them. What had that young woman in the hiking photos wanted for herself? Travel, adventure, connection, learning. I began to write, hesitantly at first, then with growing conviction. Places I wanted to see, skills I wanted to learn, people I wanted to reconnect with, books gathering dust on my shelves that deserved to be read. By midnight, I had filled 3 pages. None of the items were revolutionary. I wasn't planning to climb Everest or sail solo around the world, but they were mine. Desires untethered from my role as a mother, unrelated to Amy's needs or approval. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Over coffee, I made 2 phone calls that would reshape my life. The first was to the community college where I'd once taken night classes. "Yes, I'd like to register for the spring photography course," I told the administrator. "And do you still offer that watercolor workshop?" The second call was to a travel agent. "I'm interested in that seniors group tour to the national parks this summer," I said. "Yes, just for one." By the time I hung up, I felt a fluttering excitement in my chest. I looked around my living room, seeing it with fresh eyes. The furniture was arranged exactly as it had been when Thomas was alive. The walls covered with photos of Amy's milestones, the shelves filled with knickknacks I'd accumulated but never particularly loved. It was a room designed for the past, not the future. I spent the rest of the day rearranging furniture, taking down some photos, and making a donation pile of items that no longer brought me joy. With each change, I felt lighter, more myself. Around 3 o'clock, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was a courier with an envelope from Harold's office. Inside was a copy of the letter he'd sent to Peter and Amy, formally demanding repayment of the unauthorized withdrawals. It was respectful but firm, leaving no doubt about the seriousness of the situation. I read it twice, then slipped it into my desk drawer. The ball was in their court now. They could choose to make amends, or they could choose to sever the relationship completely. Either way, I would be okay. Not because I didn't care. I would always care, always love Amy, but because I was reclaiming the parts of myself that existed independently of her, the parts I'd neglected for too long. That evening, as I sat on my newly repositioned couch with a book I'd been meaning to read for years, my phone pinged with a text message. Amy, we need to talk. Can I come by tomorrow? Simple, direct, without apology or accusation. I considered my response carefully, typing and retyping several versions before settling on one just as simple. Me. Yes. 10 a.m. Come alone. Her reply came immediately. I will. I set the phone aside, my heart beating a little, faster. Tomorrow would determine whether there was a path forward for us or if the breach was permanent. I wasn't naive enough to expect a magical reconciliation, but perhaps there was still hope for understanding. Whatever happened, I would face it as the woman I was rediscovering. Not just Amy's mother, but Amber in her own right. A woman with her own dreams, boundaries, and dignity. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in weeks. At precisely 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. I'd been up since dawn, alternating between nervous cleaning and rehearsing what I might say to Amy. Now, taking a deep breath, I opened the door. My daughter stood on the porch looking nothing like the polished, confident woman who had laughed at the Christmas dinner. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face bare of makeup, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She wore jeans and an old college sweatshirt, clothes I hadn't seen her in since before she met Peter. Hi, Mom, she said quietly. I stepped aside to let her in. Hello, Amy. We moved to the living room, where she immediately noticed the changes. The rearranged furniture, the missing photos, the empty spaces where Thomas's collections once cluttered the shelves. You've been redecorating, she said, surprise evident in her voice. Just making some changes that were overdue, I replied, gesturing for her to sit. Would you like some coffee? She nodded, and I was grateful for the brief reprieve as I went to the kitchen. When I returned with 2 mugs, Amy was studying the small stack of travel brochures on the coffee table. National parks? She asked as I handed her the coffee. Since when are you interested in camping? Since always, I said simply. Your father and I used to hike and camp before you were born. I'm thinking of revisiting some of those places this summer. Amy looked genuinely confused. Alone? With a tour group, I clarified. For seniors. I couldn't help but smile at the term. I'd never thought of myself as a senior before. Amy set down her mug. Mom, about Christmas. I sat across from her, keeping my expression neutral. Yes? It got out of hand. We were drinking, and Peter thought it would be funny, and then everyone was laughing. She trailed off, perhaps realizing how weak the explanation sounded. And you joined in, I finished for her. She looked down at her hands. Yes, I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air between us. Simple words, seemingly sincere, but somehow incomplete. Why? I asked finally. Why did you think humiliating me would be funny? Amy flinched. I didn't think of it as humiliation. I just what? She struggled to find the words. Peter said it would be a good joke, and I wanted his friends to, like me. They're all so successful and sophisticated, and I'm always worried they think he married beneath him. The admission surprised me. So you elevated yourself by pushing me down? Amy's eyes filled with tears. When you put it like that, it sounds awful. It was awful, I said, keeping my voice gentle but firm. I spent Christmas night eating cold food alone while listening to my daughter and her husband mock me. Do you have any idea how that felt? A tear slipped down her cheek. I didn't think about how you would feel. I got caught up in being part of Peter's world. I nodded slowly. I understand that pull, wanting to belong. But Amy, at what cost? You've changed so much since you married him. I've grown up, she protested weakly. You've become someone who treats people according to their usefulness. I countered. That's not growth. Amy wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I received the letter from your lawyer about the money. Yes, I acknowledged. There were unauthorized withdrawals from my account. Peter says you gave him permission to manage your investments, she said, though her tone lacked conviction. I did not, I replied firmly. And I think you know that. She didn't deny it. Instead, she stared down at her coffee. He's furious. He says you're trying to ruin us by asking for my own money back. The timing, she said. His business is struggling. The loan was supposed to help until a big payment comes through next month. I sighed. Amy, I've seen your social media posts, the boat, the kitchen, the weekend trips. That doesn't look like a struggling business to me. She had the grace to look ashamed. The boat was used, the kitchen was. Peter says we need to project success to be successful. And my loan? Was that going to the business or to projecting success? Amy didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Some of both, I think. The admission cost her. I could see it in the slump of her shoulders, the trembling of her hands around the coffee mug. For the first time, I wondered if Peter's financial control extended to Amy as well. Does Peter let you see the business accounts? I asked carefully. Her eyes darted up to mine, then away. Not really. He says I wouldn't understand them. He gives me a household budget and… She trailed off, perhaps realizing how it sounded. And you need to ask for anything beyond that, I finished for her. Amy nodded miserably. He says it's better if one person manages the money. That separate accounts cause divorce. I kept my expression neutral, though inside I was seething. The controlling dynamic was clearer now. Peter isolating Amy, making her dependent, turning her against her support. Systems. Amy, I said gently. That's not a partnership. That's control. It's just how we do things, she insisted, but without much conviction. And how is that working for you? I asked. Are you happy? The question seemed to catch her off guard. I don't know. Sometimes. When things are good, they're really good. But lately… Lately what? She shook her head. It doesn't matter. What matters is fixing this situation with the money. Peter wants me to convince you to drop the whole thing. He says family should stick together. Interesting, I observed. He thinks family should stick together when he needs money, but not when it comes to treating family with respect. Amy flinched again. Mom, please. He's really worried. He keeps checking his phone, waiting for calls. He hardly sleeps. I studied my daughter's face, the worry lines, the exhaustion, the fear. This wasn't just about the money. Something else was wrong. Amy, I said slowly, is Peter in some kind of trouble? The way her eyes widened told me everything. No, I mean, just the usual business stress. But her hands were shaking as she set down her coffee. Are you in danger? I asked directly. Does he hurt you? No, she exclaimed, and this denial seemed genuine. He's never laid a hand on me. It's just, there might be some people he owes money to. People who aren't as patient as you. My blood ran cold. What kind of people? Amy stood abruptly. I shouldn't have said anything. I need to go. I rose as well, reaching for her hand. Amy, wait. Whatever's happening, we can figure it out. But I need the truth. She hesitated at the door, torn between loyalty to her husband and what looked like genuine fear. I don't know everything, she said finally. But I think some of the business investments weren't completely legitimate. And now people want their returns. My mind raced. What had Peter gotten himself, and by extension my daughter, involved in? Stay here, I offered impulsively. You don't have to go back until we figure this out. Amy shook her head. I can't. He'll know I talked to you. He's expecting me to come back with good news about the money. And if you don't? Her silence was, answer enough. Give me a day, I said. Don't tell him anything yet. Let me make some calls, see what I can find out about his business dealings. Amy hesitated, then nodded. Okay, one day, but Mom, be careful what you ask. Some of these people. She didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. Whatever Peter was involved in, it wasn't just shady. It might be dangerous. After she left, I sat in my newly arranged living room, my mind whirling with possibilities and fears. This was no longer just about standing up for my dignity or reclaiming my money. My daughter might be in real trouble. I picked up the phone and dialed Harold's number. I need you to look into something right away, I said when he answered. Peter's business dealings. I think there might be more going on than we realized. What kind of more? Harold asked, concern evident in his voice. I'm not sure, I admitted. But Amy is scared, and that scares me. I'll see what I can find out. Harold promised. In the meantime, be careful, Amber. If your son-in-law is involved in something illegal, you don't want to get caught in the middle. But I was already in the middle. Amy was my daughter, and whatever trouble she was in, whatever mistakes she had made, I couldn't turn my back on her. The question was, could I save her without losing myself in the process? By evening, Harold had called back with disturbing news. Peter's construction company had taken deposits for projects that were never started, borrowed against properties he didn't own, and failed to pay subcontractors for months. Several lawsuits were pending, and there were rumors of connections to a local loan shark known for aggressive collection methods. It's a house of cards, Harold concluded, and it's about to collapse. What about Amy? I asked, my stomach tight with fear. Is she legally implicated? Not from what I can tell, Harold replied. Her name isn't on the business documents, but if she's signed anything recently. I thought of Amy's frightened eyes, her trembling hands. What should I do? Legally. Stay out of it, Harold advised. This could get messy. But as a mother... He paused. That's a different question. After hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness, weighing my options. I could walk away, protect myself, let Amy face the consequences of her choices and her husband's crimes. Part of me, the part still raw from Christmas night, whispered that it would be justified, but another voice, stronger, clearer, reminded me that love isn't transactional. It doesn't keep score or demand repayment. At 9:30 p.m., my phone rang. Amy's name flashed on the screen. Mom? Her voice was a terrified whisper. Can you come get me? Please? I was in my car before she finished explaining. Peter had received a threatening visit from men demanding payment. There had been shouting, then Peter had grabbed his keys and disappeared, leaving Amy alone in the house with instructions to pack essentials. When I pulled into their driveway 20 minutes later, Amy was sitting on the front step with a single suitcase, looking lost and very young. I didn't know who else to call, she said as she climbed into my car. You called the right person, I assured her, squeezing her cold hand before pulling away from the curb. The drive home was silent, Amy staring out the window at the passing streetlights, occasionally checking her phone. Peter hadn't called or texted. When we arrived at my house, I settled Amy in her old bedroom, now my craft room but still equipped with a daybed. She sat on the edge of it, looking at the walls now, covered with my watercolor attempts instead of her teenage posters. "You've really changed things," she observed. "I've been rediscovering old parts of myself," I explained, sitting beside her. "And finding new ones." Amy nodded, her gaze falling on a small painting of the lake where we used to vacation when she was a child. "I remember that place. Dad used to take me fishing at dawn. You hated getting up that early," I recalled with a smile. "But I loved being in the boat with him," she said softly. "Just the two of us on the quiet water." The memory hung between us, precious and fragile. "Mom," Amy finally broke the silence, "I've made such a mess of everything." "We all make mistakes," I said gently. She shook her head. "This is more than a mistake. I let Peter isolate me from you. I let him control everything, the money, my time, even how I dressed and acted around his friends." Her voice cracked. "I became someone I don't recognize, someone who would laugh while her mother was humiliated." The painful honesty of her words touched me deeply. "Why?" I asked softly. "Why did you stay when things started changing?" Amy wiped at her tears. "At first, it was exciting. Peter was charming, successful, everything I thought I wanted. Then gradually, he started criticizing little things. My friends weren't sophisticated enough. My job wasn't ambitious enough. My clothes weren't stylish enough." She took a shuddering breath. "By the time I realized what was happening, I felt trapped. He controlled all our money. My name wasn't on anything except debt. And I was. Ashamed. Ashamed to admit I'd made such a terrible choice." I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. "Oh, Amy. The worst part," she continued, "was how he talked about you. Always subtly putting you down, making jokes at your expense, testing to see if I would defend you or join in. And I failed that test. I failed you." Her sobs broke my heart. I held her as she cried, this grown woman who was still, in so many ways, my little girl. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she managed between sobs. "For Christmas, for everything." "I know," I said, stroking her hair. "I know you are." When her tears subsided, I brought her a glass of water and sat beside her again. "Amy, I need to ask you something important. Did you know about Peter's business practices? The fraud?" She shook her head. "Not at first. I knew things weren't going well, but he always had explanations. It was only in the last few months that I started. Finding papers, overhearing phone calls. I confronted him once, and he..." She swallowed hard. "He didn't hit me, but he threw a glass against the wall. After that, I was afraid to ask." Relief washed over me. Amy wasn't complicit in Peter's crimes, just another of his victims. "We'll figure this out," I promised. "For tonight, just rest." As I turned to leave, Amy caught my hand. "Why are you helping me? After how I treated you, I wouldn't blame you for turning me away." I smiled sadly. "Because I'm your mother. That doesn't change, even when things between us do." In the morning, we called Harold. The news wasn't good. Police were looking for Peter, whose car had been found abandoned at the state line. Several angry investors had come forward, and the district attorney was preparing fraud charges. "What about Amy?" I asked while she was in the shower. "She should cooperate fully," Harold advised. "Make it clear she wasn't involved in the business. She might lose assets tied to Peter, but she shouldn't face charges unless there's evidence she participated in the fraud." When Amy emerged, I relayed the advice. She nodded, resigned but resolute. "I'll talk to the police. Tell them everything I know." She looked around my newly arranged living room. "I have to start over anyway." The next few months were difficult. Amy was questioned repeatedly by investigators but eventually cleared of wrongdoing. Peter remained missing, though federal authorities had traced him to Mexico. The beautiful house was foreclosed upon, the boat repossessed, and Amy's credit destroyed by the debt Peter had accumulated in both their names. She moved into my spare room while sorting out her life. Initially, I worried about boundaries. Would we fall back into old patterns? Would she expect me to solve her problems? Would I enable her to avoid responsibility? But something fundamental had changed between us. Christmas night had broken us, but from that breaking came an opportunity to rebuild on a healthier foundation. Amy found a job at a local real estate office, modest but steady. She insisted on paying rent, though I put the money into a savings, account for her without telling her. In the evenings, she sometimes joined me for my painting class or helped me plan my summer parks tour. We talked, really talked, about things we'd avoided for years. Her childhood, my marriage to Thomas, the pressure she'd felt to live up to impossibly high standards, the loneliness I'd experienced after becoming a widow. Slowly, cautiously, we built a new relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation or financial dependence. One evening in late spring, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Amy turned to me. "I've been approved for an apartment," she said. "It's small, but the complex has good security and it's close to work." I felt a mixture of emotions, pride in her independence, sadness at the coming separation, relief that we'd navigated this difficult time without permanent damage. "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "When will you move?" "Next weekend," she replied. But I was thinking, would you like to have dinner together on Sundays? Not every week if you're busy, but maybe regularly? The simple invitation meant more than she could know. Not a demand, not an expectation, but a genuine desire. "For my company? I'd like that very much," I said, smiling. As summer approached, I prepared for my national parks tour. 2 weeks exploring places I'd dreamed of revisiting for decades. Amy helped me shop for hiking boots and a good camera. The night before my departure, she surprised me with a small farewell dinner, just the two of us, nothing elaborate. She cooked her father's favorite pasta dish from the recipe I'd taught her years ago. After dinner, she handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a leather-bound journal with my name embossed on the cover. "For your trip," she explained. "I thought you might want to record your adventures." I ran my fingers over the supple leather, the thoughtfulness of the gift touching me deeply. "There's something else," Amy said, her voice growing serious. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a check. "This is the first payment, for the money Peter took." I stared at the check, a modest amount, but clearly significant given her current salary. "Amy, you don't need to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted gently. "It might take years, but I'm going to pay back every cent. Not because you're demanding it, but because it's right." I looked at my daughter, this strong, resilient woman who had lost everything but was finding her way back with dignity and integrity. "I'm so proud of you," I said, meaning it with all my heart. Amy's eyes filled with tears. "I'm trying to be someone you can be proud of. Someone I can be proud of." As we cleared the dishes together, I realized that the painful Christmas night had ultimately given us both an unexpected gift, the chance to break destructive patterns and rebuild a relationship based on genuine love and respect rather than obligation or financial entanglement. I would never again be the woman eating cold turkey by the sink, silently accepting disrespect in exchange for connection, and Amy would never again be the woman who valued appearances over authenticity. We had both served our time in roles that diminished us. Now we were finding our way to something better, something real, and that was worth more than any inheritance I could ever leave her.